I'm Stewart Bloor, and the first question I must ask is, did you enjoy summer? We seem to have a fantastic end to spring in May. However, since then, it's either very early spring, i.e. the start of March, or even October, November, depending on how you look at it. That's the weather that we've got and we've had for a week or so now. However, as always, the fishing continues. I've cast out, watching that rod tip, and as I talk, it's starting to rain and I need to put the umbrella up. This is the place I fished a couple of days or so ago, where although I did catch a nice enough roach, I was after tench, and I did lose a couple of fish on a size 12 hook, and that was very early in the strike, just seconds I had the fish on. And then I made the decision to switch to a size 10 hook, which I felt would make a difference, and I thought it had, because the next fish I was able to play it, start to bring it in, but then that also parted company with the aforementioned hook. Little things that you work on during the session. I think like most anglers, I have a very defined plan of attack whenever I'm going somewhere, especially if it's a place that I am familiar with. Then I know how I'm going to fish, the approach that I'm going to take, and all the finer details, because I'm familiar with the venue. However, you still think it through while you're there. Not too complicated, not talking about being over the top, but you still think to yourself, like I did, size 12, not working, let's go for a 10, big grain of corn, the balance between the hook and the bait is fine. And that could have been the difference between not catching a tinker and getting one in the net. I have had a few little movements on the rod while I've cast out this morning. Could be liners, could be fish mouthing the bait. It's hard to say sometimes. However, as you look at it, the positive sign is there is definitely something in there, in the area that I've put my bait into. So that, although I haven't had any action yet, is a promising start. I've located a fairly dense weed patch. I've now got that sorted. I know where it is. I can either go over it or just in front of it, and I'm going for the latter. But I have had a fish that took me straight into it, and I could feel the weight of the weed as the tench was going away from me. I did lose that one, big clump of weed on the retrieve, and I just had two coots diving as well for the bait, and I knew that it would be a matter of time. Well, one of them must have picked up the corn with the hook on it, felt that something wasn't right, because I could see the rod juddering, felt that something wasn't right, it wasn't hooked, it let it go, and now they've gone. However, they do have a small brain, and it looks like they are coming back, because it's all about the food on the bed of the lake. So the bottom line is I'm up against it a little bit this morning with the weed and also the pair of coots. I'm having to stand up, wave the landing net around, making hissing noises to keep those birds away from the baited area. Seems to have worked though. They're on the way now elsewhere, and hopefully those little brains that I referred to will forget all about my brown crumb and corn that's about 20 yards in front of me. I'm fishing with a single grain of corn, and I'm throwing out by hand balls of brown crumb laced with corn, and that acts not only as an attractor but also keeps them there as well, all that crumb on the bottom as well as the corn, of course. When they get their heads down and start grubbing about on the bed of the lake, that helps to keep the fish in the swim. Time to mix some more bait. It's quite sloppy, I've just added the water. However, give it a minute or so and the crumb will absorb a lot of the liquid and it'll be nice and firm, and I'll be able to put some more balls of bait into the place where I'm fishing. As far as the natural world is concerned, few swifts have been in the area. They've moved on. They're in the wider vicinity, but just not feeding over the lake at the moment. Quite low. Obviously they follow the insects, and that's the level where they are today. A few grey wagtails, probably multiple sightings of just a handful of birds, including juveniles. That's always good to see. In my own garden, in fact, we're up to 11 species of juveniles this year. That's actually in the garden as well. The latest addition yesterday was a dunnock. You can always tell the young, they flap their wings to get the attention from their parents because they like to be fed. And then a time comes when the parent ignores the juvenile and then they have to start feeding themselves. And I was thinking as well, no cormorants on here. That's great, they've all gone. And within about 2 minutes, one landed and has been diving and feeding. I've had another little knock there on the rod tip. I know that I've got fish in this area where I am fishing, but somehow the issue is translating them from being there to being here. That's the challenge at the moment. A very practical backrest for the rod there, which is my crumb bucket. It's a Barbel Special 1.5 pound test curve, a Kuma Xeon Reel 6 pound Maxima Chameleon. It's a Drennan front rest, and the rod is positioned perfectly just above the surface of the water. Waiting still for that first fish though. There's the bait. It's a Drennan super specialist hook, hook length of about 6 inches, size 6 shot, 5mm bead and a 7 gram bomb. Well, I stayed and I stayed and I stayed and I couldn't stay any longer because my dog is due a haircut. I didn't catch anything. I'm going through rather a lean spell at the moment, but when I worked in professional football, there was a phrase that managers and coaches often used, and it was fine margins. If I'd have caught that tench that I lost today, if I'd have caught just one of the fish that I lost in my previous session to this venue, if I'd have just caught one of the half decent perch that I lost yesterday on the canal, then we would be talking a totally different ball game altogether. In fact, I would be saying I haven't had many fish in the last few sessions, but they've been good ones, and it's definitely a case of quality over quantity. Fine margins. Sometimes in angling now they work for you, and other times they work against you. But I must say that even if I'm going through a tough period, as it were, even if I've had a few blanks, I'm never disappointed, I'm never angry, and I never feel like packing fishing up. I don't want to throw my rods into the undergrowth. A couple of cyclists in front hogging the whole of the road, the lane, which is causing this car as well to slow down. I don't know what they're doing that for, otherwise we'd be able to just get past. But I never feel like packing fishing in just because I've had a few blanks. It's all part of the journey, without doubt. Anyway, as I have said, my dog is due a haircut today, so that's where I'll be going shortly. I also think that if you are blogging life's journey like I am, and in particular with fishing, that you have to include the highs and the lows not just the former, but also the latter. Just imagine, for example, you were following someone who is into his golf and you're into that as well. When you watch him walking around the course, filming as he goes, you don't want to just see the times that he tees off and the ball goes straight onto the green, straight into the hole, and perfect shot every time. What you want to see is the number of times he tees off and then 30 seconds later he's messing around in the brambles to try and find his ball, or the bracken, or looking up a tree because that's where the ball went. It's times like that that actually show you that the person is recording reality. It's not just about let's edit out all the negative stuff, the blanks if you're a fisherman, or the poor shots if you're a golfer. Let's put everything in there, warts and all, as they say. And then if you are following that golfer, sticking with that illustration there, you think to yourself, I can relate to him because I don't have a hole-in-one every time I hit the ball. I don't make a perfect shot every time I strike. Actually, I can relate to the fact that he's messing around in the bracken and the brambles and looking up the tree. So blogging life's journey has to be exactly that. Therefore, for me at the moment, it's not just about catching fish, but also about blanks as well.